John, have you heard anything already this morning that makes you want to change your prediction about whether or not by the third quarter of 2010 we'll start the uptick?
No, I don't think so. Nothing's made me feel like that's too pessimistic, certainly.
Okay. It seems as if Michael Covarrubias may have something to offer in that regard.
I think that the problem with any sort of forecasting and relating to whether TARP's going to work or whether this new buyback plan is going to work is a twofold overview, and it's bad news and good news. The bad news is nothing is predictable anymore. Nothing. You cannot tell, not only from a macro or a microeconomic sense what's happening, but worse, you cannot tell what the politics are going to be tomorrow. You cannot tell whether a company will be put into business or out of business, whether the employees will be punished or rewarded, because the chaos that's in Washington is truly chaos. And the VIX indicator, which for those of you who follow that stupid stuff in the morning and at night and during the middle of the day, you know, it's out of control. The reason the stock market goes up 500 points one day and down 300 is because no one has confidence in the direction of the decisions that are being made, and they can go in many different ways depending on, you know, the whims. So that's sort of the bad news. The good news, I think, is that the administration's attempts are what I would liken to an icebreaker going through the, you know, the northern pole. It is on a direction. It is breaking up, you know, glaciers as best as it can. It's going to have variances, but it's committed to going. It's committed to writing as much checks as it needs, to printing as much checks as it needs, and it's committed to fixing this. And that's what the G20 is all about, and they're trying to make sure the rest of the world says the same thing. So there is this force of will, albeit screwed up on a daily basis, that is directionally headed towards putting enough into this system to get us out of this mess. Now, 5 years from now, my belief is you should own every real estate asset in the country, because it's the inflation that's going to take off is going to be gargantuan, but that's another day. So I think that the bad and the good of today's predicting is, one, it's hard to predict because you don't know what today's decision is, but two, you know the direction is we're going to do whatever it takes at the Washington level to get this thing back on track.
Very interesting. I want to encourage our audience to offer your question cards if there are questions that you want asked. We'll get to the audience questions in about 20 minutes, so please contribute. Well, we can't predict, but let me ask you to make a prediction. What might the new normal look like whenever it comes? Will costs and labor and land costs, once we've hit bottom and start the climb back up, what might that look like going forward? What kind of income producing properties, how will they be affected? Office buildings, apartment buildings, mortgage requirements for single-family homes. What might the new normal look like? Anyone want to?
I'll speak about the economy generally, and then I'll let somebody else talk about housing more specifically. And you know, when the new normal sets in, it's going to look more like the late 80s, early 90s. Than the last 15 years. The new normal is going to be something that generates a very productive economy. You know, the productive resources in the United States have not been lost. Just some of them have lost their way. The U.S. economy will recover. It will be on very fine footing in those 3 to 5 years that were already mentioned. But with respect to housing, that's another issue.
You know, in the lending world, obvious, and it's already started, right? The underwriting criteria has and will continue to tighten because there's just to be a severe reaction to the loose lending standards. So that's pretty predictable. What's curious to know, and what really will drive, I think, recovery is whether or not there'll be any faith in the securitization market again. And I think that that is absolutely critical in order for the velocity of lending that there be some velocity in lending in order then to those folks that put real equity into deals in order to obtain the financing. So that market needs to come back both in the single family side and in the multifamily side, or the multifamily commercial side. The question is how it gets engineered and whether people will ever believe rating agencies and third-party verifiers. That's because that's just, those guys just have no credit.
You tell too many lies. And
yeah, just.
Actually, Dr. Kroll, I was interested, the emphasis on jobs and investment in real productivity. What does it mean that we've been disinvesting in education in K-12 and very specifically in higher education, public higher education in this state for the long-term outlook for the economic health of the state?
Well, I think you are talking long-term because on the one hand, you still have a really strong skilled base here that is underemployed right now. So in that sense, and we have a lot of baby boomers who are probably going to be working longer than they originally expected. So in that sense, the kind of the crisis that was raised by a Public Policy Institute of California study on, that we aren't going to have enough skilled workers to fill the jobs may be mitigated by that. At the same time, in the long term, I'd say the K through 12 is probably the most critical. How do you get those students to the point that they can really manage and become productive make it through the college system? I think we have to continue investing in higher education. It's not just because I'm at a UC. But at the same time, anyone who has a college-bound aged student in their household knows that there are a lot of choices in California still for educating people who are ready to be educated at the college level. I don't see that as critical a problem, although certainly it needs to be nurtured going forward, but the more critical one is how do we have successful education in the K through 12?
All right, thank you very much. Now, my friends, mortgage lenders are requiring more stringent qualifications in the form of larger down payments, higher incomes, and better credit histories. In the near term, have lower home prices compensated for higher mortgage requirements? And in the longer term, will mortgage requirements be eased to compensate for price stability or rising prices? Anybody want to offer a guess?
I think in the longer term, the mortgage requirements will be eased, but only because banks will learn, again, how to assess risk. Banks don't know how because they haven't been doing it for 15 years. They've long since jettisoned their risk assessors, risk evaluators, because they're expensive. And when you can just throw things out to Wall Street and say, here, you take it, you don't have to assess the risk. So it'll take time for them to hire that army of risk evaluators again and change their lending criteria.
Other comments?
I was going to say.